All right, good morning, Sequoia. Congresswoman Jackie Spier has served parts of San Francisco and San Mateo County since she was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2008. Prior to her federal election, she had served 18 years in the California State Legislature. Jackie Spier was born in San Francisco's Sunset District and is a lifelong resident of the Bay Area. She attended local public schools and went to college at the University of California, Davis. While in Congress, she interned for State Assemblyman Leo Ryan in his Sacramento office, and after graduating, joined Ryan's Washington, D.C. staff upon his election to Congress. She returned to San Francisco to earn her law degree from UC Hastings College of Law before rejoining Congressman Ryan as his legal advisor. In November of 1978, Jackie and the congressman led a group to Jonestown, Guyana, to investigate claims that constituents were being held against their will by Reverend Jim Jones. Spier and Congressman Ryan were escorting defecting cult members to their plane when Jones's gunmen attacked them. Congressman Ryan and 4 others were killed. Jackie Spier was shot 5 times and left for dead. This near-death experience motivates her vow, quote, "not to waste another minute of my life." As a state legislature, she authored more than 300 state laws supported by both Democratic and Republican governors. Today, serving, let's give a round of applause for some bipartisan, huh? We certainly could use some more of that. Today, serving in the United States Congress, Jackie serves on two crucial committees: the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Armed Services Committee. She works tirelessly to fight wasteful spending, ensure the intelligence community has proper and effective oversight, and has been recognized as a champion fighting military sexual assault. Jackie is a leading voice in protecting women's health care and a vice chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. Locally, she has worked in the district to keep City College open and accredited, has helped over 8,000 job seekers since 2010 through the Job Hunters boot camps, and has recovered $4 million for veterans who had been denied benefits. She has supported federal programs to create affordable housing, has secured $125 million for the Caltrain electrification in the president's budget. In 2010, after a 2010 natural gas line explosion in San Bruno neighborhood, killing 8 and destroying 38 homes, Jackie took a lead in seeking justice and support for the affected residents. She continues to advocate for stronger safety laws, improved oversight of pipeline regulators, and greater accountability for PG&E. In 2012, Newsweek named Jackie to its list of 150 fearless women in the world. She is also the co-author of a popular self-help book for women, This Is Not the Life I Ordered. When asked for her philosophy on life, Jackie often quotes Winston Churchill, quote, "Success is never final and failure is never fatal." Personally, I have known Congresswoman Jackie Spier for the past 8 years. She has always been responsive and generously taken time out of her incredibly busy schedule to speak with students. In one special example of her dedication to civil rights and educational issues here in our school district, she recently did a magnificent job moderating a star-studded panel on the 1965 Voting Rights Act's 50th anniversary. How dedicated is Jackie Spier to her student constituents? That was the same night that the San Francisco Giants were in Game 7 of the World Series. It is therefore with great pride that I introduce to you a friend to our district schools, a genuine advocate for her constituents, congressional representative to most of you here today, a survivor and a fighter. Sequoia High School, please welcome and joining me in welcoming Congresswoman Jackie Spier. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Well, good morning. Are you excited about today? Why? It's election day, all right? So how many of you voted again? Let me see your hands. So just a few of you. All right, so we're going to have a mock election here. Everyone who, if given a chance, will be supporting Donald Trump for president, I want you to raise your hands. Okay. Those of you that would be supporting Hillary Clinton, raise your hands. Those of you that would be supporting Green candidate Jill Stein, raise your hands. Those of you supporting Gary Johnson, the independent, raise your hands. Okay. So, I think those of you that selected Hillary Clinton are going to be very happy tonight, because I feel very confident that the first woman president ever to be elected in the history of this country, some 240 years old, will happen tonight. And that actually kind of sends chills up and down my spine, because women didn't get the right to even vote in this country until 1920. So for the first 100 plus years, 150 plus years, women didn't even have the right to vote in this country, because it was presumed that men would vote for them. Kind of patronizing, isn't it? That somehow women didn't have to bother their heads about issues around who should be running our country. So that's all changing today. And for many of us who've been in politics for a long time, it's a huge step forward. Because the very first time I ran was in 1979, and as Mr. Evans said, it was, a pretty emotional election, because Congressman Ryan had been assassinated, the first member ever in the history of this country to be assassinated in the line of duty. And I was running for Congress. And people would stop and say, well, I'm not going to vote for her just because she's a woman. And I thought to myself, how many times do you hear, I'm not going to vote for him just because he's a man? And what I found when I ran that first time and lost was that it wasn't so much men that weren't willing to support women as much as it was women who weren't willing to support women. But that was way back in 1979. A lot of things have changed, and changed for the better. So what I would like to do in the time that we have is I want to tell you a little bit about my life, because in the end, it's stories that help you remember what's important. And I want my story to maybe help you, as you navigate through life, realize that you're not alone, and that everyone has ups and downs, and it's just really, really important to keep moving forward, even when life tries to draw you down. So I had a very normal blue-collar life, being raised in South San Francisco as a young kid. Went to public schools there, then decided that I wanted to go to a Catholic girls' high school. I don't know what came over me, but in any case, I went to Mercy High School in Burlingame, and then after graduating from Mercy, went on to UC Davis. Now, I didn't get my first choice. I applied at that time, that was in 1968, you didn't go on college tours. Your parents told you where you could apply to school, and you applied to those schools, and that was it. My parents said you can apply to 2 schools, Stanford and UC Davis, because UC Berkeley is too radical. So I applied to 2 schools, and I got rejected from Stanford. And my boyfriend at the time got accepted. He had worse grades than me, but he was a football player. In any case, I was pretty devastated. I thought, here all my hopes were in getting into Stanford, and I didn't get in. So as you plan for your futures and you apply to lots of different schools, you may not get your first choice, but you know what? There are great schools throughout this country. So I ended up going to UC Davis. It was 20 minutes from the state capitol. And so what did I do? I became an intern for then Assemblyman Leo Ryan. And truly, the rest is history. Had I not gone to UC Davis, had I not had the experience of interning in his office, I probably would not be in elective office today. So things work out. And you should look at where you are right now and realize this is the time to start exploring what your opportunities are for life. I worked on my very first political campaign when I was 16. I was just at the Democratic headquarters last night and yesterday afternoon, and lots of young people are there. If you think you've got an interest in politics or government, now's a great time to get involved. If you're interested in science, go volunteer at a biotech company in the area. If you're interested in being a small business person, volunteer at a local business and see if that's what really makes you excited. Because in the end, you're going to spend too much of your time in your job. You've got to make sure you have the passion for it. Do not follow the money. Money is not going to give you happiness. Sometimes I think there's this compelling interest in wanting to become the next Mark Zuckerberg. I have a son like that. He thinks he's an entrepreneur, and so he's working on a startup right now. And I sort of want him to kind of engage in becoming more involved in the community. But in any case, it's very important to have that passion. So I go to college, I then go on to law school, I then go to work for Congressman Ryan in Washington, D.C. And then we find out that this church in San Francisco called the People's Temple had 2,000 members in its congregation. It was very powerful. And all of the politicos in San Francisco were kind of paying homage to the Reverend Jim Jones because he could generate votes for them. He could put out 1,000 people onto the streets of San Francisco walking precincts and make the difference in whether someone got elected or not. So he was politically connected. He served on the Human Relations Commission and then was the head of the Housing Authority at one point. And then all of a sudden an article came out in a news magazine that kind of painted a different picture about him. And around that same time, Congressman Ryan started hearing from parents of young adults who gotten involved in the People's Temple, and they had kind of disassociated themselves with their family. And then Jim Jones took about 900 members of his congregation into South America, into a country called Guyana, and in the jungles, in the depths of that country, built a commune. And the question was, are these people there voluntarily? Are they being held there against their will? Is there something wrong going on there? Now, a number of people had defected from the People's Temple, and they had come back and they had told us stories about what was going on there, that there was sexual abuse and physical abuse and gun running, and that there was mind control going on. So Congressman Ryan decided, I'm going to find out for myself. I'm not going to take anyone's word for it. He was one of these leaders that just had to see things himself. When the riots broke out in Watts in the mid-'70s, he went down there and taught school. He was a teacher by profession. I guess it was actually the late 60s that happened. In any case, he decided to make the trip down there. So we went down there. We finally got an invitation. We fly small planes onto this deserted airstrip. We get into these trucks, and we get taken to the commune. And they're putting on a good show for us, and they're taking us on tours, and they're doing a great show in the pavilion, and they're dancing, and they're singing, and then we had a list of people we wanted to meet with, and we met with them, and we handed them letters from their parents, and I could see a whole pattern developing. Everyone that we met with said, I'm very happy here, and I'm getting married to one of the other members, and life is really great. In the course of that evening, a couple of press people who were with us, one of them was walking around the pavilion, and two people slipped him notes that said, we want to get out of here. So then our deepest fears were realized. People were being held against their will. And so the next morning, I helped them get their belongings and brought them back to the pavilion, and then more people wanted to leave, and more people wanted to leave, and it became very tense and very emotional. And one couple was standing there, I'm looking at them. One parent is pulling the child one way, the other parent's pulling the child the other way. One wanted to leave, one wanted to stay. It was very tense. Eventually, we realized we didn't have enough space on the two planes. So Congressman Ryan was going to stay behind. I was going to be part of the first airlift. We started to leave the commune on the back of these dump trucks, and I'm thinking, wow, we just dodged a horrible experience. And then there was a knifing attempt on Congressman Ryan, and they brought him down to the truck, and we took off for the airstrip. At the airstrip, I'm loading passengers onto the planes, and then all of a sudden, we find out that there is a tractor trailer that had followed behind us with 7 gunmen on it, and they came and they started shooting. I had run under the back of the plane, was hiding by a wheel with my head down, pretending like I was dead. And then they came and they shot us at point-blank range. Congressman Ryan was shot 45 times. I was shot 5 times on the right side of my body. I'm lying on that airstrip. I'm looking down at my leg, and it's totally blown up. I'm looking at my arm, and the bone is broken, and it's sticking out of my forearm. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is it. My life is over. I'm 28 years old. I'm not going to live to be 85. I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have kids. I'm not going to have any of that. So I said the act of contrition and waited for the lights to go out. And when they didn't, I decided that my grandmother, who was then 85, shouldn't live through my funeral if I could help myself get onto that plane. So I dragged my body over to the cargo hold of the plane. Of course, I couldn't do anything else. Someone shoved me into the cargo hold. The plane wasn't going anywhere because there were bullet holes through both the wheel and the engine. Eventually, they took me out. Unfortunately, they placed me on an anthill. But the one thing you do when you're dying is you don't sweat the small stuff. So I was there on that airstrip for 22 hours without any medical attention. How do you get through the night? Well, you're in shock. They'd put a tarp over my leg, and the people that had survived had gone to this local bar that was some short distance away, and every few hours, one of the survivors would come over and hand me a bottle of Guyanese rum and give me a swig of it to get through the night. Eventually, we got airlifted out, got to the capital of Guyana. There's a U.S. medevac plane with a flag on the side of the plane. And they're lifting me out of the cargo plane that I was brought to the capital in, and lifting me into the medevac plane. And it was like someone had just wrapped me in the American flag. And there's never a time that I say the Pledge of Allegiance or sing the national anthem that I don't think about that particular moment in my life. It was a moment that I will never forget. And it reminds me every time how lucky you and I are to live in this country, that we have the rights and the responsibilities that we have. So I'm airlifted out. They said, one of the medical technicians on board said she had another 3 minutes to live. I was that close to death, but I survived. Came home, came to Andrews Air Force Base, had surgery, was then moved to a Baltimore Shock Trauma Center because they thought they were going to have to amputate my arm and or my leg because I had gangrene so bad. So 10 surgeries later, 2 months hospitalization, I get out, I come home. There's death threats against me, so I can't stay at my family home. Over that first weekend, I realized for the first time I wasn't in pain. Now, I was in pain, but I was thinking about others. I was distracted. It was good. And I thought, I do not want to be a victim the rest of my life. I want to move forward. I want to be a survivor. So on the very last day that I could take out papers to run for Congressman Ryan's seat, that Monday, I went to the county courthouse here in Redwood City. My arm is in a contraption because I don't have the use of my right hand, and I sign the document to run for Congress for his unexpired term. There are already 11 candidates in the race. They've been running for over 2 months. It was a 6-week campaign, and at the end of 6 weeks, I lost. This is what a 3-time loser looks like. True. I lost for student body president in high school, So devastated, I stayed home from school for 2 days. I thought my life was over. I lost the first time I ran for Congress, and I lost in 2006 when I ran for lieutenant governor of California. So here's what I've learned in life. What Winston Churchill said, what Coach John Wooden said is true. Success is never final, and failure is never fatal. Do not be afraid to fail. I keep a paperweight on my desk in Washington, D.C. that reads, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?" Think about it. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Think about all the things you don't do because you just don't want to lose. You just don't want to fail. My experience has taught me that failure is really the first step to success. Had I not lost for Congress in 1979, I wouldn't have been prepared the following year to run for the Board of Supervisors here in San Mateo County against someone who had been in office for 20 years. And every political pundit said I didn't have a chance. And I beat the seated member on the Board of Supervisors by 18,000 votes and became the youngest member ever to serve on the Board of Supervisors here in San Mateo County. You can do the same thing. So, I want you to take calculated risks. I want you to push yourself. I want you to think that, yeah, maybe I really can't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to try anyway. When I was working as an intern for then Assemblyman Leo Ryan, and I would drive to Sacramento and I would see that Capitol Dome, I thought, oh, I'd love to run for office. But I never, ever thought that I had what it took. And then I get elected to the Board of Supervisors, and 6 years later I run for the State Assembly, except I wasn't the chosen candidate. Then Speaker Willie Brown wanted to make sure I did not get elected because I was too independent. And so they made sure that no money came from Sacramento and no support from members in the state legislature. And they actually bused people, staff members down to walk precincts for the other candidate. In the end, I won that race by less than 500 votes out of 40,000 votes cast. And the very last week of the campaign, I had to take a calculated risk. I had just bought a condominium in South San Francisco. I had to take a loan of $50,000 on that condominium so that I could get the mail out. It's a good thing I did because I won by so few votes. So then I get married. Another message, don't rush to any altar. You've got lots of time. I was 37 when I got married. And then the following year, we had our first child. I was the first legislator to have a baby while in office in Sacramento. And then I had a couple of miscarriages, one at 17 weeks, so it was a very, very hard process to undergo. And then we adopted a baby, and life was pretty great. And then the birth mother decided to take the baby back. And I was beside myself. I'm driving home from Sacramento. I'm talking to my husband. I said, why do these bad things keep happening to us? And he says to me, no, wait a minute. You know, we've got this great son. We've got each other. We've got our health. We can try again. So then we went to a fertility specialist who said, based on the age of your eggs and your medical history, you've got a 10% chance of getting pregnant with in vitro fertilization. So that didn't look so good. So then I started running statewide for Secretary of State. And then, lo and behold, I got pregnant naturally. The odds were so slim. We were so ecstatic. I go to the governor's press conference room and I announce that I'm no longer running for Secretary of State, that it's a high-risk pregnancy, and that I'm just running for re-election. And one of the reporters called me out and said, well, Ms. Spier, aren't you a feminist? Isn't this a blow to feminism? I said to myself, what rock did you just come out from under? And I said to him instead, I said, well, wait a minute. There is a life at stake here, and I'm not going to do anything to risk this life. We were amazingly thrilled. I mean, what were the odds of me getting pregnant naturally at 43? 2 weeks later, my husband was killed in an automobile accident. I was driving to Sacramento. We get the phone call, your husband's been in an accident. I turn around, I come back to Mills Hospital, which was then still operating as a full-fledged hospital. They made me wait for almost an hour. They take me into the ICU where my husband is brain dead. A young man with no brakes had run a red light and hit my husband's vehicle broadside. Now, my late husband was an ER doc at the county hospital. He saved poor people's lives every single day. And his life was taken by someone who was poor, but grossly irresponsible, who operated a vehicle, knew he had no brakes, and ran a red light. The hardest thing I ever had to do in my life was pick up my kindergartner from school, bring him to the hospital, and have him say goodbye to his dad, and then pull the plug. It doesn't get any harder than that. And then I find myself as a widow, as a single mother of one, pregnant with a second child, and 3 months from personal bankruptcy. So what do? Here I thought I'm a law school graduate, I'm elected to public office, and I am like beside myself. So what worked for me was family, friends, and faith, the 3 F's. I brought people around me to help me figure out what to do. We sold our dream house. I moved back into our other house that hadn't sold. I lost lots. But then 6 months later, a very healthy baby girl was born. She was named after her late father. It was tough raising 2 children on my own. It was tough doing the profession that I loved and then being told by the voters that, you know what, you're term limited now. And all of a sudden I was out of the state assembly and had to find a new way of making a living. And then I ran for the state senate and got elected. And all of those things were big challenges. But I'm telling you the story because I want you to realize you can do anything. You can persevere. You can accomplish anything in your life that you want to accomplish. I have a daughter now who just graduated from college. I'm telling you the story because she's closer to your age. She's had a tough time. She had a tough time because she didn't have a daddy for a long time. I remarried 8 years after she was born. She all of a sudden had to share me with someone else, and that was tough. She was diagnosed with ADHD and diagnosed with auditory processing disorder and diagnosed with OCD, and she had a tough time getting through school. Now, when she was 16, she went to a career day and met a newscaster, and all of a sudden she decided, well, maybe that's what she was going to do. So she went to the University of Missouri. They have a good broadcast journalism program there. And at the end of her second year, she says, Mom, she called me, I can't take it anymore. I can't do this. And I says, yes, you can. Just keep moving forward. So she graduated in June. She's now working in Colorado Springs as a weekend anchor and a weekday news reporter. And she called me yesterday morning, and she was upset because something had gone wrong. Those things are going to happen in life. But don't give up your dream. Do not give up your... Hillary Clinton had a dream to become president, and she lost in 2008. She's on the cusp of becoming the first woman president in the history of our country. Don't give up your dream. So, my goal today is just to make you realize that you have the world at your fingertips. You're going to a great school. You've got great teachers. You've got parents who want the best for you. Don't throw it away. May your reach always exceed your grasp. Don't be afraid to fail. take calculated risks to achieve your goals, and never, ever give up. So that's my message for you today. How much time do we have? Another half hour? Okay. All right, so now we're going to open it up to questions that you have. Yes? You need to stand up.
Stand up, introduce yourself.
Tell me what year you are. Okay, Diego.
And my question is, how ready do you think the United States as a country is for a woman president?
How ready are we for a woman president? As ready as we're ever going to get. The truth is there's no difference between a man and a woman except for leadership style, conceivably. I think that President Obama said it best when he said, there will be no one in the history of this country, neither I nor Bill Clinton or George W. Bush, who walked into that Oval Office more prepared than Hillary Clinton. I mean, imagine, she's been a U.S. Senator. She has been Secretary of State. And before that, she was in the White House observing each and every day the decisions her husband was making as president. She's been there in some of our toughest moments in recent history. So she is as prepared as anyone to be president of the United States. Now, we don't know what challenges are going to befall her and befall all of us, but hopefully she will have a Congress that will want to work with her. It is very frustrating to work in a Congress where the Republican majority, as Mitch McConnell said when President Obama was first elected, he said that his number one task as the pro tem of the Senate was to make sure that President Obama was a one-term president. That's leadership? Trying to defy and undermine the President of the United States? So what we need to do moving forward is try and bring the two parties together, or at least the elected representatives of the two parties together, to move this country forward. Okay? Thank you, Diego.
Stand up, introduce yourself. Look great here. Richard.
Hi, my name is Teo, and I'm a senior.
Hi, Teo.
Hi. So what is your definition of success, and what does it what does it take to be a leader?
What does it take to be a leader, and what's my definition of success? So there's an interesting article that I would like all of you to read, but particularly the young women, that was in the Atlantic Monthly last May 2015. It's called The Confidence Gap. And what's interesting is that in studies that have been done, success is more correlated to confidence than competence. Sort of defies our thinking in some respects. But confidence is a huge part of success. Look at Donald Trump. I mean, by all measures, he has accomplished a lot. He has been, quote, successful. It has a lot to do with the fact that he is very confident. So, one of the things that was done in this article was they looked at a study at Hewlett-Packard, just down the road. And at Hewlett-Packard, they actually announced an opening for a job, and then they looked at the applicants. And what was interesting was that the men who applied for the job had maybe 50% of the experience required. But they applied anyway. The women who applied only applied if they had 100% of the qualifications. So it's a great example of how confidence plays a significant role. If you're not confident, it's very hard to be a leader, even if you're competent. So that's one component. The other component of success and leadership is you got to have a fire in your belly about an issue. You've got to feel strongly so that you can convince others to have them follow you. And leadership really requires, I think, the number one quality that you want in a leader is authenticity. You want them to be authentic. You want to believe that they know how you feel and that you're interested in righting wrongs. You want someone who is not afraid to take on powerful interests, because there's plenty of powerful interests that are trying to keep things the way they are or change them to benefit one person or one company or one interest over another. And it takes people with courage to say, no, that's not right. So those are the elements that I think are really important in terms of leadership.
My name is Madison, and I'm a senior. And my question is, how does it feel being one person representing approximately 640,000 people with their own individual ideas?
Okay, Madison, that's a good question as well. So when we look at representation, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. There's the way of looking at it where you're strictly a representative, which would mean you'd have to poll your constituents every time you had to take a vote on a bill. Now, that's pretty tough to do. Or you take the position that you're a trustee, that on election day, if I am lucky enough to get reelected to Congress, that the people that voted for me, and even those who didn't vote for me, are entrusting in me the confidence that I will represent them and do the job right. And if I don't, then in 2 years, they'll have the opportunity to kick me out. So for the most part, I think that's the way you have to measure. Now, do letters count? Do phone calls count? Yes, they do. So it's a measurement of what people are thinking. But sometimes I've got to step away from that and realize they don't have all the facts sometimes, or the issue is really complicated, and vote what I think would serve the people the most. In my elective office career, I'll say that some of the best times for me were when I was really under the gun, so to speak, where they were really taking me on. I took on the Correctional Guards Union in Sacramento when I was in the state legislature. Nobody took them on. They were extremely powerful. They would give $1 million to the governor every election cycle to make sure that their contracts were the sweetest. And they were all about, protecting their union and their offices. So I got involved because I was doing oversight, and all of a sudden we created a hotline so people could call about problems in government where there was waste or abuse or fraud. And over the course of a few months, all the calls were about the Department of Corrections. I'm thinking, what's going on there? Well, they had played all these games where they had a really good sweetheart contract. So at the time, they got a 37% increase in their salary over 5 years, while the professors at the University of California got a 3% raise because they were so powerful. And then they would play these games where one would call in sick one day so that their buddy could work double time and make more, and then they would reverse it the next day. So they played all these games, and we uncovered all of those. And they were furious with me, and they took me on. And they are partially responsible for why I didn't, I believe, get elected to the lieutenant governorship. They wanted to make sure they shut me down. But I never doubted for a moment that I was doing the right thing. So, I believed, and do today, that people elect you to do make the tough decisions and be courageous enough to stand up to powerful interests. And that was an example of one that I did. I stood up to PG&E after the explosion. I said, this is not acceptable. And I forced them to change how they were handling the management of gas transmission lines throughout their system. I introduced a bill to change it for the entire country, but the gas operators had too much power, so I wasn't successful in getting it passed for the whole country, but I got PG&E to do it locally. So sometimes you've got to take your victories where you can. Sometimes you don't get the whole loaf.
Hi, Jackie. I'm Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
I appreciate you coming here. I know you've been speaking about very heavy topics, but I'm just very curious. Since people in Congress choose their own pay, do you have to just pick a number and then divide it by 75 cents per dollar?
I'm sorry, say that again? I'm not following you.
Since the whole wage gap thing, do you have to pick a pay? Since people in Congress choose their own pay, do you just divide it by 75 cents per dollar?
Well, first of all, you should know that the salary for members of Congress is fixed, and the only way that your salary can be increased is if you vote to increase it, but it can't take effect until the following Congress, so that the voters have an opportunity to kick you out if they don't think you should get the pay raise. We haven't had a pay raise since I've been in Congress. Now, we get paid just fine. But just so you appreciate that, they do, in fact, are held accountable by the voters because that pay raise can't go into effect until the subsequent Congress. Now, in terms of the wage gap, in terms of the income divide that exists in this country, it is real. And ironically, the candidacy of Donald Trump has elevated that issue. Here's one of the richest men in the country who has touched people who feel disenfranchised because they can't get work anymore, because these trade deals have been done which end up exporting jobs to other countries. I haven't voted for one trade deal since I've been in Congress. That's something where I agree with Donald Trump on. And it was one of those issues where President Obama was very, very interested in getting this last Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement passed. And I was very clear that I would not vote for it. And as the election cycle went on, more and more people decided they weren't going to vote for it. And even Hillary Clinton, who at one point supported it, decided that she was opposed to it. So there is a recognition that in the country right now, there is a income divide that is so great that the only people seeing upward mobility are those at the very top, and that we have got to address that issue. The increase in the minimum wage is a step in that direction. Most people used to think that the minimum wage was just for kids. You can have a minimum wage, and it's only kids in college and high school that are making minimum wage. That's not even true. Most kids in high school can't even get jobs. But most people on minimum wage are adults, mostly women, and sadly, women with children, trying to make it on very small amount of money. Now, at one point, my Republican colleagues wanted to cut food stamps in the United States, and I was livid about it. They were talking about, these welfare cheats and blah, 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 blah. Well, if you make over $24,000 and you're a family of 4, you can't even get food stamps. Now, think about it. Here in this county, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, if not the wealthiest, try to live on food stamps as a family of 4, making $24,000 a year. Where are you living, even? So I was so outraged that they were trying to cut the food stamp budget in half that I went onto the House floor one night, and I had a silver platter with a empty bottle of vodka, a steak and a empty jar or a phony jar of caviar. And I'm walking onto the House floor, and the parliamentarian stops me and says, "Ms. Spier, you can't take that onto the House floor." And I said, "Well, why not?" He says, "Because you're creating a demonstration." I said, "Well, what's the demonstration?" She says, "Well, you can't take that silver platter." I said, "Okay." So I left the platter in the speaker's lobby, and I took these items onto the House floor. And then I spoke. And I talked about food stamps and how critical they were to families in this country. And then I talked about my colleagues who, over the course of the August recess on the Republican side, had traveled to places like Russia, where they were getting vodka and caviar, and they were getting their food paid for. Or they were going to Argentina and having steak. And that particular speech went viral, with me putting up this bottle of vodka. But I made the point, how hypocritical you are. Members, there's 25% of the members, over 100 members right now, are living in their offices. They're not homeless, but they are homeless. But they're using taxpayer funds and living in their offices, which I think is unseemly. Why should their staff have to deal with the fact that they're living in their offices? Now, they try to spin it as, well, you know, they're being frugal. Well, they just don't want to spend any of their salary on paying rent. Well, there's a lot of homeless people that would like to have someone just, maybe we should let homeless people come stay in our offices too. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that goes on in Congress. And to your point about the income inequality, it is very real. And Donald Trump has tapped in it. Bernie Sanders has tapped into it. I think that Hillary Clinton realizes it's a serious issue that we have to deal with. Increasing the minimum wage, and we've done it in this area. We're going to see it in the state go up to $15 an hour by the year 2020. It will then ratchet up salaries above that as well.
Congresswoman, thank you very much for your time. I loathe to do this because we're so thrilled to have you here, but we do know your time is valuable. You have been here for an hour. I was wondering if I could finish with one question.
Sure.
What advice could you give our junior, seniors, some select sophomore classes, for them to, how can they get more engaged, more involved in the political process? Our country seems so divided right now. People are so turned off to all of the politics. We've had the most corrosive election we've had in maybe ever. What optimistic or constructive advice could you provide for our young people in the audience?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. What I would suggest is don't sit on the sidelines. You know, I think sometimes as young people you think, well, it's not my job. It is your job. It's your job to become part of this process. I have great faith in the millennials. I think that once you take charge in this country, issues around LGBT issues will be history. Issues around gun violence prevention will be history. Issues around immigration will be history, because you understand that these litmus tests that have been so corrosive and have eroded our democracy have no place in our democracy. So I want you to get involved. Follow me on Facebook. Come volunteer as an intern in my office, or Snapchat, or whatever else you guys use. Instagram. But get involved. Don't sit on the sidelines. There's elected members on the City Council, on the Board of Supervisors, in the State Assembly, in the State Senate, and in the House. They all can use your assistance, and you'll learn a great deal. I have a student intern program in my district office, and I have one in Washington, D.C. So I welcome you to become part of the process. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, ladies. Congresswoman Jackie Spier.